Okay, so hi again, and if I can click on this, welcome to another little piece on grammar. I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible, but as you can see from the PowerPoint, it does get more and more complicated as you go along, so just bear with me, follow on for as long as you can. Sorry for being a little bit patronising there, but a lot of people find this really sort of difficult. So what you've got in white in the centre of the screen is a simple fragment. It's the first line from Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf, and it just says, "Cunningly creeping a spectral stalker." So you're talking 5 words, comma in there, and what you can see around it, I'm going to explain how each of those word classes relates to the sentence and what they mean. Now this is sort of level 1, if you so wish. So everything within the green is your basics that you should know. Your next level up is the blue there, and I'll explain those as we go along, and they're a little bit more sort of technical, and then we'll go a little bit further than that as well. What I mean by level 1 is that everything on this screen is the first level. So when you're discussing this, when you're writing essays on it, when you're doing exam papers on it, level 1 is knowing what the word class is. Level 2 is knowing what it does. So if you can pick out verbs and adverbs in an unseen piece of writing, that's step 1. And you won't get many marks for that, to be honest. So knowing this is kind of fundamental. So if you can pick out verbs and adjectives, verbs and adverbs, and then say what they do and what their effect is, then that's going to get you up to your sort of C grade and beyond. But I'll do that in a different video. For now, let's just try and get sort of the basics together. So you look at the sentence, "Cunningly creeping a spectral stalker," and you know, because it's a sentence, there's got to be a verb in there somewhere, there's got to be a noun, there's got to be an adjective. Now I always sort of start backwards. So the first word I'm going to look for is the noun, and that's always a thing. That's always something. So I look through the sentence and I go, the stalker, that's a thing. So I know it's the noun. Now working backwards, I know, and if you work mechanically, this sort of makes a lot more sense. I know that an adjective always describes a noun. So the word spectral describes the word stalker, so therefore I can guess, I can figure out that's an adjective. Again, I know there's got to be a verb in there. All sentences, and we'll get to that later on, have a subject, a verb, and an object. So the verb here is, I hate to use it, but it's the Key Stage 2 way of doing it and the Key Stage 1 way of doing it. It's the doing word. So it's the word that shows us that something is happening. So the word is creeping, and there it is. So if you can nail those 3, I mean that's the basic. You should know that as a minimum. A noun is a thing, an adjective describes a noun, and a verb implies some kind of action. Okay, those 3 are your fundamentals. And then we go a little bit further. Again, you should know what an adverb is. An adverb describes a verb in the same way as an adjective describes a noun, an adverb describes a verb. So how was this spectral stalker creeping? It was creeping cunningly. 9 times out of 10, the ly ending, you've got a verb. You've got an adverb. It's not always the same, because you don't say fastly, you say fast, and you can say that you run fast. Run being the verb, fast being the adverb. Okay, so there's certain times, like always in English language, that something will catch you out. But there's your basics, your 4: adverb, verb, adjective, noun. If you can spot a thing, you've got a noun. If you can spot what describes it, you've got your adjective. If you can spot an action, you got a verb. And if you can describe if you can spot what describes it, you get yourself an adverb. What have we missed out? We've missed out a comma. Now this leads us on to the sort of the next mini level. This comma in this case, and this isn't always, it's just in this sentence, isn't a conjunction, isn't a connective, it isn't separating anything. It's given us a pause. That's all it's there for, because this sentence has been played around with. It sounds a bit strange. Okay, so you've got a normal sentence. Normally it would be, a spectral stalker was cunningly creeping, or was creeping cunningly. Alright, but this writer not do that bit yet. This writer has chosen to play around with it, and I'll tell you what that phrase is in a second, because I've done this in slightly the wrong order. The other word we've missed out is a, which is known as the indefinite article. Now that's simply because it refers to something that's indefinite. It refers to something that's not set in stone. So it says a spectral stalker. That could be any spectral stalker in the world. If the word was the spectral stalker, then that would be the definite article. Now that's your simplest way of remembering it. Indefinite is a, definite is the. Newspapers use this a lot, so you might say the dress, and it's usually the is in italics, so it's the definite article. It's referring to one single specific dress. You'll say the Mona Lisa because there's only one. You don't say a Mona Lisa. That would be indefinite. That would imply that there's loads and loads of them everywhere. So the is the definite article. A here is the indefinite article. Now this whole sentence here, if you look at it, is just a whole main clause. Okay? It looks like it's split into two, but it's not. And it's for the reason I was mentioning before, which is foregrounding. The writer has made a very specific choice here to put cunningly creeping at the start of his sentence, and therefore he needs the comma. Therefore he skipped out the verb was, which is a very boring sort of flabby helping auxiliary verb kind of thing. We don't really need it, so he's cut the flab out here. He's got rid of it. He's getting to the essence of how this poem was written years and years ago, and so he's decided to put cunningly creeping at the start. Now that's a technique known as foregrounding. He's taken what he wants to draw the reader's attention to, and he stuck it right at the start of the sentence. He doesn't care about the spectral stalker so much. He does care that it was cunningly creeping. So he's taken that bit and he's shoved it right at the front, which is the foregrounding. Now this is the bit that messes most people up. Cunningly creeping is alliteration. Okay? That's fine. It's repetition of a consonant. Don't get mixed up with repetition of a vowel. Repetition of a consonant is alliteration. Okay? And it can be two like it is here. It doesn't have to be three in a row. And then again, we'll talk about it in the other videos, but it's used for some kind of impact. I mean, the cunningly creeping here, the harshness of the C makes it sound nasty, makes it sound evil. So there you've got your sort of level 2. Some of you will be looking at spectral stalker and going, well, that's alliteration too, because it's repetition of a consonant. And you're half right. You'll get away with saying the repetition of S is alliteration. But I always use the analogy that, your top end GCSE and your A level, you need to be like a laser beam. You need to be very, very, very specific about what you're talking about. Bottom end, you can be a shotgun. You can go, oh, here's some words on the page and here's what they mean. Bottom end, you get some marks. You guys should be aiming top end. So spectral stalker, you're thinking like a laser beam. You're being very, very, very specific. It's a technique known as sibilance. Now, if you look at the difference between the spectral stalker sound and the cunningly creeping sound, obviously they're very different. The alliteration is harsh. The sibilance is a lot softer. So the alliteration would bring to mind that the monster, whatever's being described here, the stalker, in fact it's Grendel, for those of you who know the story of Beowulf, the cunningly creeping gives a hard edge, a nastiness to Grendel. But the sibilance, the repetition of S, the spectral stalker, brings to mind that word sinister. There's a certain underlying sinister mode to this monster. And the alliteration gives one part of it, but the sibilance brings out another. You're able to make that distinction, you're talking higher level marks. Okay? So that's the most of the blue stuff. Let's go back to the green again. Now this is almost looking at another level of your 4 basic. So your 4 basic: adverb, verb, adjective and noun. Quick recap: noun's a thing, adjective describes a thing, verb is the action, adverb describes the action. Dead simple. We should all know that by now. If we go a little bit further, stalker is known as a common noun. That's your everyday noun. Now, if it was a capital letter, and if the stalker's name was Grendel, which it is, it would take a capital G, and it would be a proper noun. This is a bugbear of most English teachers. Kids who write their names and don't give themselves capital letters. A proper noun is a place or a person. It deserves a capital letter. It deserves respect. You deserve the respect. You deserve a capital letter when you write your own name. This stalker here is a common noun. It doesn't take a capital letter. It doesn't need one because it's an everyday thing. What it also is it's concrete. It's a thing and you can touch it. Now that might seem like all nouns are concrete nouns. However, there are things, and the word escapes me at the minute, but things like love, hatred, that are not concrete nouns. And I'll say the word whenever I remember it. It's a singular noun because there's only one stalker. There's only one thing. Okay? A plural noun would be stalkers. So there you've got three sort of different levels of noun. I still can't remember what the opposite of concrete noun is. Okay. Adjective. I mean, what type of adjective is it? There's a few different ones. This one is probably the simplest one, and it's an attributive adjective. Now, if you think of an attribute, it's a characteristic. So most adjectives describe. This adjective is giving a characteristic to the stalker. It's saying that the stalker is spectral. I'll talk about spectral a little bit more later on, but in this case, spectral is referring to it as a ghost. Okay, so you've got your attributive adjective. It's giving a characteristic to the noun. Haha. The opposite of a concrete noun is an abstract noun. That's just come to me. So a spectre, if you take the word, so spectral is an adjective because it describes stalker. However, if I were to take the word spectre, which is the root word of spectral, then spectre, S-P-E-C-T-R-E, is a noun. You can't touch a spectre, so therefore it's an abstract noun. The stalker is concrete, you can touch it, so it's a concrete noun. Alright, sorry about that. The verb choice here is very interesting because it's a continuous verb. The ing ending lets us know that it's an incomplete action. It's still happening. And again, that just adds to this ominous air of this sentence that it's almost as if the stalker has never stopped creeping. So it's something that's happened in the past, cunningly creeping a spectral stalker, possibly, but the ing could say that it's a present tense thing, so it's continually and still happening. And again, this ing, it adds to the idea that things are happening and things are occurring. It makes it just seem that a little bit more scary. And then if we apply the same rules to the attributive adjective as we have, then the adverb is giving an attribute to how it's creeping. So it's giving an attribute to the verb, so it's an attributive adverb. Whole other level there. There's another level beyond that, but we won't go that far. Here we go back into the blue, which is our sort of our move away from the nuts and bolts of grammar. If you think of creeping as a sound, then you could argue that the verb creeping is onomatopoeic. And that's how you spell it up there. I always remember, because I used to struggle how to spell the end of onomatopoeia. First bit, dead simple, how you say it, onomato. But then peic, if I remember POE from poetry, that's most of the time I talk about onomatopoeias when I'm talking about poetry. And you spell the end part of onomatopoeia the same way as you spell poetry, so it's P-O-E. So it would be P-O-E-I-A if it was onomatopoeia. But here we were saying something is onomatopoeic. We're describing it, so it's an... Yeah, I can all hear you shout adjective. So the idea of creeping is possibly, arguably, an onomatopoeic word because it makes us think of the sound. One of the kids pointed this out when I showed them the sentence. I'd never seen it before, but they said that spectral stalker was a metaphor. I didn't get it. They had to explain it to me. But what they said was, I mean, you know that a metaphor is a comparison. So the stalker is being compared to a spectre. Now, it can't be a spectre because a spectre is a ghost. and the stalker, as we've said, is a concrete noun, something you can touch. So therefore, the stalker is being compared to something. There's no like, there's no as, so therefore the comparison means it's a metaphor. Makes perfect grammatical sense to me. And a lot of this, if you simply employ logic, it starts to make sense. It's very, very step-by-step logical. So the idea that the stalker is spectral, it's being described like it's a ghost, therefore we've got a metaphor. Next bit up here, I said I'd talk about spectral a little bit more. The root word of spectral, so the word that it comes from itself, the root word of it, is spectre. So there's another little term for you, something that if you distill and you boil down words to their very, very basics, then that's what the root word is. So if you look at creeping there, the root word of, or the gerund as it's called, is creep. And if it's used as a verb, which it can be, I mean it can also shift a little bit and be a noun. You can call someone a creep as a thing, or you can say that someone is creepy, and then you change it into an adjective, and then you start to conjugate it. So when you have a verb and you change the endings, you conjugate the endings. So creep turns to creeping as it's conjugated. Now with things like adjectives, what you do is you add prefixes or suffixes, and that changes the meanings of the word. So you look at the word spectre and it's a thing. So the word class that should be appearing in your head is noun. It's an abstract noun. It's a spectre. You can't touch it. It's a thing. Now if we want to change that, if we want to describe something as being like a spectre without using so many words, we add a suffix. So we change the root word and we add al onto the end, which is a suffix. It's known as a suffix because it's something that changes a root word and comes at the end. Okay? A prefix would come at the start. So you think of all those words like anti or dis or un. They are all prefixes because they change things from the starts of the word. An al ending is a suffix, so it comes along and it changes spectre from being a noun to spectral, which is indeed an attributive adjective, as we've already said. So there's another couple of little bits there for you. Go a little bit further still. Actually, we come full circle and we go right back to the start. Every single sentence will have a subject, a verb, and an object. Okay, we found the verb. The object of the sentence isn't actually here because, as I said at the start, it's a fragment. So we'll find out in the next line what the spectral stalker is going on to do. But the subject of the sentence is what is doing the verb, always. So we find the verb in the sentence, which is creeping, and then we try to figure out what is doing the creeping. And we know what's doing the creeping is the spectral stalker. So therefore, the spectral stalker is the subject of the sentence. A little bit further still. Anytime you have a noun which has an adjective right next to it, and it has to be right next to it, it's known as a noun phrase. Something that's more likely than not used in newspapers. So you might have, let's say this was a newspaper report, we'd switch it around, we'd have spectral stalker 56 creeps cunningly through the blah-de-blah-de-blah. Alright, kind of takes away from the mystery of it all, but that's what they do. They say, you know, if I was in the newspaper for, I don't know, killing someone, it would be local teacher Alex Smith, age 129, horribly stabs his wife. That would be terrible. My wife's looking at me now. But the noun phrase would be local teacher. Okay, so it's something that adds to, and it's something that again makes things really, really short in a newspaper. So I wouldn't want to say Alex Smith, who is a teacher in the local area. I don't have the room for that. My editor's going to chuck me out if I start writing like that. So I use a noun phrase because it's quicker, and I just write local teacher Alex Smith. Okay, right. I don't want to sue that bit. That's like 20 odd different word classes from one simple sentence. Okay, and we haven't even mentioned the fact that it's a simple sentence because there's no additions to it, there's no connectives, there's no conjunctions, there's none of that. So it is a simple sentence. So that's 20 odd now. Some of the kids I've sort of shown this to have gone all the way up to 30. They've started discussing things like capital letters, the lack of a full stop, the fact that it's a quotation. There should be quotation marks in there. There should be a little aposiopesis ... at the end because it's an incomplete part and it's supposed to be a bit of a cliffhanger. You can break it down in its constituent parts, and you can talk about double consonants, you can talk about the vowels in it, and that all adds up. None of that bit really matters whenever it comes to you discussing things in an English language paper. None of it really matters. Everything that's on the screen is what will come up, or what you can analyse and what you can talk about. If you're going on to A level, you can take this a whole step further. And it sort of links to the idea of the alliteration and the sibilance again. It's that idea that the sound that any writer chooses to write or chooses to put on a page has an impact. So you might think that writers just write this stuff and it comes out, you know, like the muse sings to them or whatever. However, there are some writers who will spend hours and hours and years perfecting every single sound. So remember, we talked about the alliteration, the cunningly creeping, being quite harsh. And we talked about the sibilance, the spectral stalker, being quite soft. Now you can take that whole step further and you talk about what type of alliteration and what type of sibilance it is. Now the type of alliteration is velar alliteration, and you can see just these sort of 5 points here are all of the different sounds that you can make. And these are the sounds you make with your mouth. You make them every single day, and you do this without even thinking. But they're broken down into 5 sort of separate areas, and then you can sort of play with them a little bit with different sounds and blends and things like that. The simplest sounds, the ones that you learn first, are the labials, and they're the sounds you make with your mouth, with your lips, basically. Okay, so the P's and the B's, those are the things you learn first, because it doesn't mean you have to move your tongue, because tongue's a muscle. You have to develop it as a kid. So, you know, whenever you're a kid, you don't have the same muscles as you do. You don't have the same muscles in your mouth. The palate part at the top of your mouth, the velar, the soft palate, isn't necessarily strong enough and isn't hard enough whenever you're a kid. So you're trying to learn all these words and your mouth isn't even developed yet. Your ears aren't even developed yet, so you can't hear the things. So the first ones that you can do is you can make sounds with your lips. So this is probably why most kids say mummy before they say daddy. It's not any relation to who they love the most. It's the fact that their lips can move. So the P's and the B's are the simple ones. Anything where you push air out is a plosive. Anything that sounds violent, anything that's like a p or a b or a v, anything where you use your lips to push the oxygen out, those are plosives, and they're part of the labial sound. The next one is where you put your lower lip with your upper teeth. So your front 2 teeth will touch the bottom of your lip, and I've just made a labiodental sound there when I went an F sound. The bottom lip touched my teeth and I pushed the air out and it was an F. Okay? Again, going back, anything where the air goes from your lungs and is interrupted by any part of your mouth, that's a consonant. Anything where the air just comes straight out and you only move your lips a little bit, but you don't block the air, that's a vowel. That's the only difference. So you think of A, E, I, O, U, you don't necessarily block the air at all. It comes straight from your lungs out your mouth. But you think of F, I'm forming that. I'm pushing the air out. I'm stopping the air somehow with my mouth, my teeth, my tongue, something. So that's a consonant. But a labiodental, again, as it says, dental, teeth, labio, lips. So I put my bottom lip on my top tooth and I go f, and it makes some great sounds. The next one, tongue and teeth, is a dental. So any time where you put your tongue at the back of your teeth, at the front of your teeth, around your teeth at all, think of the th sound. That idea, and kids learn it at different stages. Sometimes they mess up the th and the f sound. They can do their labiodental before their dental, because the dental means using your tongue more. The labiodental is quite simple. You go f, and anybody can do that. Your tongue may not be as developed whenever you're a kid, so you putting your tongue next to your teeth and making a th sound, very, very difficult, and that's why kids tend to learn it later on. So that's the third one, that's your dental. This one's a bit mental. When your tongue is close to or connecting with the alveolar ridge. So if you run your tongue along the top of your mouth, you'll notice that there's a front bit, and then there's a dip, and there's a back bit. Okay? The front bit and that ridgy bit, that's your alveolar ridge. So anything like an L sound. And you can, if you're making that sound now when you're listening to this, you sound like a bit of an idiot, like I do. But you'll notice that the tip of your tongue touches that alveolar ridge. The T sound, the L sound, they're all alveolar sounds. And again, you need to think about the effect of those sounds. That would be your step 2, your stage 2, where you start to talk about the different effects of it if you wanted to go that far. Well, you have to go that far. And the final one, the back of the tongue against the soft palate is a velar. So we go back again to that alliteration, that very, very, very harsh alliteration in the PowerPoint. Cunningly creeping. Very harsh sounds. They're velar sounds. They're velar consonant sounds. It's also alliteration, and it just accentuates again how creepy, how scary, and how possibly violent this Grendel is. Okay? Look at the amount of stuff we've covered from 5 words and a comma. You don't need to go into this much detail at all. However, knowing this amount means that you can look at any unseen piece and you can begin to pick it apart and see how it's used. If you have a piece that's full of adjectives, then there's got to be some attributive adjectives in there. The writer is trying in some way to describe. Okay? You think most 19th century texts will have these long flowing lines full of subordinate clauses, these little extra pieces of information full of adjectives, simply because people had more time to read back then and things were far more visual. Nowadays, if you read a book like The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time, the narrator has Asperger's syndrome. He doesn't see the point in adjectives. He doesn't see the point in onomatopoeia or metaphors. He just wants to get his point across. So you have a lot of short sentences. What I'm trying to get across is you can talk about all of these pieces of information if they are there, all of these word classes, but you can also talk about the absence of them. If you are doing the play version of The Curious Incident, or you're looking at some passages from Frankenstein or Jekyll and Hyde or something, you can talk about the absence of adjectives. You can talk about the presence of adjectives. Choosing whether something is there or not there is a choice made by an author. And that's all we're trying to get across in these videos. Thank you again for your time. Hopefully that made some sense.